All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to be talking today. It is a Monday, the 13th, and I know it's the 13th because it's 1 week before Martin Luther King Day, 1 week before Inauguration Day, and I'm looking forward to one thing about Inauguration Day. Arlen will return. This is going to be the last Monday for a while, I presume, without Arlen, and I heard from him yesterday. He definitely wants to be on after he gets back into this country and he's able to join me. So we're really looking forward to having Arlen on Halitics 1 week from today, and I'm sure he'll have a lot of insights into the situation in California, as terrible as it is. And we'll get to Gaza. I always start with, or at least I have been for well over a year, talking about Gaza, but just real quick, show you that caption, that thumbnail. And I want to be real clear. This is not a program. I just want to start right now that's going to be about bashing Karen Bass, or really any particular LA or California or national politician. There's a lot of blame to go around, and as Mayor Bass even said, there will be focus for doing that. I'm not going to pull punches to the extent that I can, the evidence seems to suggest that certain people are to blame, or there's been statements made that aren't accurate, including by the mayor, then we're going to talk about it. But this isn't about trying to poke fun or blame the mayor in particular for a terrible, terrible tragedy that's occurred, and a tragedy that probably, there's always been fires for California. There have been fires forever. But, before humans, there have been fires. That area is going to get fires. But the cost in lives and the heat, the amount of area that's being impacted by the fires, the longer, hotter fire seasons, yes, those are certainly attributable to human activity. And our leaders have not done what they need to do to protect us. So I got two ovals up there. Let me take one of those off. I use that expression, grilled bass, because, fish, grill, and she's being grilled. She's under a lot of heat, as you can see in the image, but I don't want this to be a program where I'm just viewed as taking shots at the mayor, unfair shots. And I've actually got a video I'm going to play for you in a little bit of a politician that I have great respect for, Senator Nina Turner from Ohio, talking about this specific issue. So we'll get to that in just a moment. If you want to join me, 240-242-5646, 240-242-5646. And don't forget, please click that like button. I don't even see it. Where is it? Where's my little like? I'm not. I think it's under my deck. Yeah, there's my like. So don't forget, click like if you get a chance. And I'll do it one more time. I already showed the subscribe now button, but we might as well do it one more time. Do subscribe if you haven't yet done so to Halitics. All right, let's get into the news for this Monday. And as terrible as things are in Los Angeles, really it is heartbreaking. And I talked Friday about areas of the city that I remember from my last visit there, and how sad it is for me to think about the Getty Villa itself. Fortunately, at least as of Friday, untouched. I'm not aware that there's damage to it since then, but that area being scorched, many trees, much vegetation right around the Getty Villa burned up, and also the Will Rogers State Park devastated by the fire, and 24 lives as of last night lost. Dozens are missing. So it's a terrible situation. But I can never forget, I can never keep from being first in my heart the deaths in Gaza, which are a direct result of American and Israeli action. So it's not as bad as the fires are. And yes, humans deserve a lot of the blame. The fossil fuel industry leadership from the president on down, deserving much of the opprobrium for what happened in Los Angeles. But as far as I know, there wasn't a decision made by the governor in Sacramento, by the U.S. president, to drop napalm in Pasadena and in Pacific Palisades and in North Los Angeles to start a massive set of of forest fires, of wildfires. It was ultimately a terrible accident, if you can use that term. It wasn't caused directly by human action. Nobody was lighting fires the way humans are dropping bombs and launching missiles into Gaza. 19 killed as of midnight this morning in Gaza over the 24 hours before then. And the death toll now, 46,584. And I was surprised when I saw that number. I was like, well, how did it why such a big jump from the Friday number that I announced? And we can see here that the count has risen by 578 since Friday midnight. And I can't explain that. We had a number of 46,006 that I announced Friday's program. And we see the count rising 578. I can't explain that. The numbers from Saturday and Sunday were, relatively low compared to what we've seen. And again, yesterday, Sunday, 19 killed. So I'm not clear whether they discovered a whole number of bodies under rubble. So that's what led to this jump. Obviously, whatever the number is, we believe it's an undercount, and the true death count, the true number of people killed by Israel in its genocide, with the full support of the unwavering commitment to it by the Biden-Harris administration, the true count probably in the hundreds of thousands. I don't know what explains the recent jump, that being over the past few days. Again, if you want to join me, though, if you have any comments, questions, concerns, thoughts about what I'm talking about, please do call 240-242-5646, and I'll check the chat, right? And there's our good friend Ari. He's always there. Ari, you are such a great, loyal viewer. I so appreciate you and everybody who takes the time to check Halitics out. I do hope you will click like and click subscribe as I've asked. All right, so the AP, this is from last night, and we will get to the mayor. We'll get to the various commentators who've weighed in. I'll give you my thoughts. We're going to talk a little bit about, play a video from Governor Newsom, which juxtaposes him and President Trump. And I have to say, President Trump just, look, I made the point you couldn't vote for Harris, and I stand by that. I didn't vote for her, and I most certainly did not vote for Trump. I voted for Jill Stein, and I have no regrets. But I know some of you voted for Trump and you like Trump, and I respect you for watching this program, for having interesting and intelligent comments about the news and insights. I really don't get it. I don't see it. This guy, he is an embarrassment. He's a buffoon. I don't think that his clown show, clown car behavior justified voting for Harris, because in the end, what matters is policy. And the policies that she has supported, the policies that she enunciated, were terrible. They're just not acceptable. They're genocidal. But that doesn't make Trump any better, right? It's two things can be true. They can both be awful. 24 dead as of last night. The number may well have gone up. Some improvement in the weather conditions, lower wind speed has helped the firefighters. But as I understand it, things are due to get worse in the next today. And maybe not until Wednesday will we see again lower wind speeds. And that's the biggest factor, right? Of course, you want rain. It is the rainy season. There isn't any rain. There isn't a lot of water in the hydrants. There isn't enough water in the reservoirs. One of the reservoirs, apparently Santa Ynez, I don't understand this. The report was the Santa Ynez Reservoir is empty. And I don't know, did they drain it? Why would you drain a reservoir? That reservoir in Palisades, there has been enough precipitation in the past year or two that the terrible drought that so much of California had been undergoing, even when I was living out there 10 years ago, has been significantly alleviated. We know there's been a lot of snow in the Sierras that helps. I don't get how a reservoir is empty. That seems very, very odd to me when the other reservoirs are mostly full. That reservoir in Palisades, Pacific Palisades, allegedly, supposedly, the fire people saying it probably didn't make a big difference. I don't understand that. You have a huge fire. You can see it right there, the image. The Palisades fire, the largest by area. The Eden fire there, that's in the Pasadena, Altadena area, also terribly damaging. And then the smaller fire in the north. And so this is obviously very significant amount of area just devastated, burned up, crisped, effed up, whatever word you want to use. So sad. All right, I want to play this before we get into. I really, feel that I wanted to play this. I watched this Progressive Democrats of America town hall yesterday. I'm not a big fan of PDA these days. I'm not a fan of any organization that sheepdogs voters into voting for the Democratic Party. They had on a very strong guest, Senator Nina Turner. She has been one of those who have been very willing, and I'm very pleased to say that, to take on Democrats, to be harshly critical of Democrats. She's harshly critical, and deservedly so, of AOC. When she did her podcast, she did a video with Brianna Joy Gray. So I give Nina a lot of props for that. I asked a question, she didn't answer, which was, is it time now for progressives to look to alternatives from beyond the Democratic Party? I know she thinks it is. On the other hand, she wasn't going to answer that at a PDA event. PDA, one of the worst when it comes to sheepdogging progressives into the Democratic Party. But I wanted to play this because I think it's instructive for a number of reasons with respect to the leadership in California. I don't totally agree with Nina. I think she's too protective of the mayor. Is it because the mayor is a woman of color like Senator Turner? I don't know. I'm not going to say that. I mean, I asked a question. It's tendentious. It suggests the answer may be yes, but she still makes a very good point.
To me, the notion of thoughts and prayers ring hollow when it is elected officials in elected offices and high places with power, and they don't do nothing but put out on social media that they want to give thoughts and prayers instead of taking action. But those of us who are not in those offices, definitely thoughts and prayers and being able to support agencies that are supporting the people who are in the greatest need. I want us to look at this moment that there's promise in this problem if we have leaders who are willing to act to try to not only ameliorate this immediate situation, but take some lessons into why it came to this in the first place. This is about a lack of neglect for generations. Is not one elected official's problem. Is not one mayor's problem.
So I totally agree with that 100%. I'm just going to stop her there. There's a lot of blame to go around. We have a systemic failure. What the LA fires to me show, along with many other terrible tragedies. We've seen the hurricane in Florida, the destruction of Asheville as a result of another hurricane. What these tell us is we have a systemic failure, not because of any one environmental event, not because of any one ecological tragedy, but because they keep happening and they're getting worse, and we're clearly not prepared. We don't have the resources set aside. And that not only that, these cataclysmic events that destroy lives, not just those killed, but families, tens of hundreds of thousands of tens of thousands of families' lives ruined, or at least very, very significantly negatively impacted because of these events that keep happening as a result of human mistakes or human behavior, human action. That is a systemic failure. We are living in is the United States a failed state? I think you could make a very fair argument. Yes, we are now living in what is a failing state, a state that is no longer capable of taking on the challenges that are facing its residents. So yes, and what we are capable of doing is lashing out and killing and bombing and destroying. What we're not capable of is saving, regenerating, creating. That said, I agree that this catastrophe has there are many to blame for it, but that doesn't mean that you excuse people. You don't get to say, well, it wasn't just her fault, it's also his fault and their fault, and it's not even politicians, it's a lot of corporate greed. So therefore, nobody's really to blame. No, you don't get to say that. You do have to call people out. We have to change the system, a system that has actually incentivized the kind of behaviors that led to this, right? Stealing water, diverting precious resources, continuing to pump carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, building sprawling cities in high fire-prone areas, right? All of that, people got rewarded to the tune of millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars. So there's plenty of blame to go around. That doesn't mean we excuse people in power today because they inherited a bad situation if they themselves didn't address it.
See how a lot of people did not hesitate to politicize this in a bad way, jumping on the current mayor in the way that they did. And even some people who purport to be on our side did that without first.
So she's saying you shouldn't jump on the current mayor. And I agree, don't just automatically reflexively blame people because they're in charge, but that doesn't mean we excuse them either. It doesn't mean we say, well, you're just one in a line, right? There's also Antonio Villaraigosa, and there's also, Tom, who was the mayor way back in the 70s, I think. I can't remember the guy. Tom Bradley, right? I mean, there's a lot of mayors you can point fingers at. Does that mean we don't blame Karen Bass? No, I don't agree with that, Senator Turner.
Standing. Stephen Covey, one of the great leadership gurus, has a quote that I really love: seek first to understand and then to be understood. And so those people who even may be disappointed in the mayor in some way, sometimes people deserve to be called in and not necessarily called out. And anybody who thinks that this travesty rests solely at her feet, they're solely mistaken. This is generational neglect from city to county to state to the feds. And it is just boggles my mind how as a nation, we got all this money to make war all around the world to disrupt other people in other countries, but we won't disrupt in a good way right here in the United States of America. And that's called building up our infrastructure ahead of time. And it is also understanding that climate chaos is real. It has been real for quite some time. And I'm telling you, Fox, I could imagine a world, and I said this to Alan, could you imagine if world leaders use their efforts to do something about climate chaos instead of making war?
All right, so, I agree with pretty much everything she said there, except for trying to, I guess, get in front of criticism of Mayor Bass and suggesting that it's necessarily, and she didn't say this, and I don't want to be unfair to her, suggesting that it's at least in part in bad faith. The mayor, and I'll play the clip. Again, the situation is so awful in Los Angeles, and I don't want to. We really need to be looking at how to solve this. And the mayor will say that, but I will start with this. It is really astonishing. I mean, she was in Ghana, and I'm not going to be jumping all over her for that. We play a clip, or I'll show you from the New York Times about that. And she came back as quickly as she could. So again, I don't want to be, this is not a program to bash Mayor Bass, but this just wasn't acceptable. And I got to play it because I think it's really important. It bespeaks failed leadership again. And you can't do this. You got to express, if you're the mayor. This was Wednesday. This is the day the mayor, for her day back after she was on some trip to Ghana. She probably shouldn't have gone. I don't know why. She was asked by the president. It's hard to say no to the president, I suppose. I don't really know the situation exactly. There were apparently a number of reports that this fire season was, there was very likely to be fires, right? That it was extreme high risk. The winds, there was a lot of vegetation, but it was very dry. She shouldn't have gone to Ghana. That said, she came back as quickly as she could. She took a military plane. She's asked at the airport, you got to be ready for this, Mayor.
Do you owe citizens an apology for being absent while their homes were burning? Do you regret cutting the fire department budget by millions of dollars, Madam Mayor?
I'm going to stop it right there. So there's two questions there she doesn't answer, and we're going to talk about the budget in a little bit. But do you regret? What was it? Do you owe the city an apology? You know, she could just say, and she's got to be ready for that. I'm devastated by what happened. What's happening in my city. I'm heartbroken at just answer. You don't have to say, I owe you an apology. I'm so sorry for what happened. As mayor, I'm sure I know I made some mistakes. If only I could go back, I would. You say that. You got to be ready for that. And then the next question, would you regret cutting the budget? So there's an argument. Did she cut the budget? You got to say, it's really, yes, I would say right there, yes, of course. We should have spent as much as we should have put more and more into the fight. But we have so many other demands. We have children who aren't getting educated. We have needy families. We have homeless crisis. There's only so much we can do. We are limited in the amount of taxation we can assess against the billionaires who have so much. I mean, there were so many places she could go with this, but just to be silent.
Have you nothing to say today?
And then she doesn't say anything. I looked this up. Was there something weird? What was going on here?
Elon Musk says that
is she just heartbroken? I mean, maybe. But issue that statement then. She later on does give a press conference, and I'll play some of it, where I thought the mayor did a much better job, obviously. But you're the leader of the city. You got to have something better than silence. It just isn't. I believe that's an AP video. So that, I showed you that's an AP video. And the questioner was being a jerk. No question. But it doesn't look good. There's really no way to spin that. And I said grilled bass because she was getting grilled there. All right, here's the mayor. Again, this is Saturday, and better anyway.
And for all Angelinos, we are hurting, grief, still in shock and angry, and I am too. The devastation that our city has faced. But in spite of the grief, in spite of the anger, in spite of the shock, we have got to stay focused until this time passes, until the fires are out. Now, we need to stay focused, but I will say that when the fires are out, make no mistake, we will have a full accounting of what worked and especially what did not.
All right, so I'll just stop it there. It's not good enough. The hydrants don't have water in them. They don't have helicopters with the aerial hoses. There's a reservoir that's empty in Pacific Palisades. So you don't need to point fingers exactly, but say, yes, there's a lot that we're really upset about, that we're working on, and say what they are. This is, and I was talking to a Democrat today, and I guess I'm a Democrat, I'm still registered, but I was talking to a guy who's, a elected Democrat, and it was about why Harris lost. And I said, you gotta answer questions. You gotta be direct with people. There's more respect for, as bad as Trump is, he does answer questions. You may hate his answers. You may think they're BS or what have you, but he does respond. He doesn't appear to be dodging and weaving and evading. And this is something that people find so off-putting. How can I vote for somebody who doesn't answer simple questions about or talk about, in this case, clear contributors, accelerants to the fire? Talk about your trip. Say, hey, I shouldn't have been out of the country in retrospect. I made a mistake. I wish I hadn't gone. Of course I do. The president asked me to go. I thought I'll go. Say that. This is why we get Trump, honestly. So there's a lot, look, this fire chief's getting criticism, DEI. I don't have any reason to believe any of the people in power. The mayor was elected. So, you want to blame someone. You think the mayor's doing a bad job, blame the voters, right? But from what I've seen of this chief, she seems to know her onions. Let me play this clip. She's doing her best to keep the focus on, non-political, but she does answer. She answers, and this is what people want, is they want answers.
For what we need to, that is my job as the fire chief of the best fire department.
And by going into the budget cuts, right? Because I'm going to delve into that in a little more detail. The LA Times addresses, were there budget cuts? Were there budget cuts?
In December, you wrote that memo. You said that these budget cuts were going to severely affect your department, from everything from brush clearance checks to make sure homeowners were doing what they needed to do, to fire hydrant checks. And yet you heard the mayor just yesterday say, no, those cuts did not affect the ability to serve and would not have changed anything in this situation. What is going through your mind? And I know this is difficult. There are a lot of politics at play. You are not a politician. You are the woman responsible for all these men and women at LA City Fire and for our residents in the city of Los Angeles. When you hear the mayor say it didn't affect anything at all, what is going through your head? If you can share that with us.
Sure. So just full transparency. Again, my position is to make sure that our people get what they need to do their jobs, and also, mind you, that they get to go home to their families. The amount of calls that our firefighters are running today has doubled since 2010, a 55% increase with 68 less people. Full transparency.
So twice as much, no, 55, a third more calls. Right, 55%, is that a third? No, it's 50% more, 50% more, right? And she's got less money for equipment. She got less equipment. So how does that not negatively impact on their ability? Of course it does. And so to deny that cuts, now the cuts were mandated, right? You have no choice. You got to cut somewhere. But at least acknowledge, yeah, this is what happens when city budgets are strapped, when we're strapped, is that essential services may not have what they need, will not have the fire department won't have the resources it needs.
This isn't a new problem for us. Since the 3 years that I've been in the seat, I've sounded the alarm to say we need more. This is no longer sustainable. So with that, we're now in a position to be properly funded. We are screaming to be properly funded to make sure that our firefighters can do their jobs so that we can serve the community that we took an oath.
But when the representative of the city says the cuts that were made and signed did not affect the response to the fire that is being criticized, the response that is being criticized by so many people, what is going through your mind?
Yeah, just again, the full transparency of the documentation, of being able to sound the alarm.
She's just saying, of course, look, I mean, what, you can keep bugging me, you can keep asking me. Obviously, if we have fewer firefighters, if we have less equipment, it's going to be a contributor to the significance of the damage. All right, from a couple of comments from Shay, just want to get to. So he says, when the mayor was at the airport and didn't answer, maybe she said, I won't be taking any questions. Maybe. I'm not aware of that. That's not what AP said. I just went by the video. It's possible. But if she had said, I'm not taking any questions, you'd think she would have kept walking. She wouldn't have just stood there. She would have had her flak protect her or something. I mean, you don't now. Maybe, I don't know, were they waiting for luggage? I don't think she waits for her luggage. So, I mean, that's kind of looking for excuses, I think. Yeah, I know there was the system did not have sufficient water pressure or water supplies for so many fires. They said maybe for such large fires too, maybe one, maybe two, but there you saw we had three, and two of them extremely large. So yeah, everything, I mean, these are foreseeable problems. Did the budget get cut? So this is something that we heard the fire chief say, I didn't have the resources. There's some arguments, well, in the end, the city was actually spending as much or more. The LA Times delves into this. This is the mayor's budget. So again, the mayor has to take ownership to a degree, but like most cities, I'm sure LA the mayor has a legal obligation to present a balanced budget and to be transparent, as the fire chief kept saying she wanted to be transparent. I don't know if she really did, but she kept saying it sounds good. It's a good talking point. The mayor needs to say, we don't have the revenues we need. We don't have the revenues we need because Prop 13, for a variety of different reasons, the state cuts, overpopulation, the federal government providing less support, massive wealth and income inequality means there's driving more need. I mean, these are all factors, and that's what we need to hear. And instead we get politicians being political. Did she cut the budget? Did the mayor cut the budget? So that's the question. And the LA Times gets into it here. The original budget, yes. 2.7% reduction. $23 million cut from the department, with much of it on reduced equipment purchases. That is obviously a huge problem. If you have fewer hoses, if you have fewer of the nozzles, if you just have less equipment, you're not going to be able to deal with the increases, as the chief said, in fires. In the end, apparently the city's paying more, but the increases that outweigh the cuts in equipment are for salary hikes. Now, I'm sure the firefighters, I don't know what they get paid. I don't know whether they were being underpaid. I can tell you that I have a relative who is a assistant sheriff, a deputy sheriff, and they're making $250,000 a year with overtime. Not in Los Angeles, but in California, in a city with getting paid in a county with a tremendously high level of homelessness. So the boost may well have been necessary. I'm not saying it wasn't, but just raising salaries doesn't address equipment shortfalls. 240-283-7262, 240-283-7262. So per shade, San Francisco has freshwater hydrants, saltwater hydrants. I've always wondered about saltwater. Saltwater is so corrosive may cause as much problems as it may address or may solve. The New York Times is not as Democratic leaning as it is, did not cut the mayor much slack. And they had a pretty harsh assessment of her trip to Ghana, saying that residents said she shouldn't have gone, she should have canceled it, based on the weather warnings. Obviously, in retrospect, that's true, but it's easy to second guess. People go on trips, and then nothing happens, and you're like, well, I should have gone on my trip. You're the mayor. You take the good with the bad, and obviously this is the very, very, very bad. And again, I think it, as Senator Nino said, this is emblematic of a failed state, or a failing at best. We are living in what I would consider to be a failing state. So I mentioned she was in Ghana. She did come back quickly, though. The fire started on Tuesday, and she returned by Wednesday. So, however much you want to criticize the mayor, I think you have to be fair. That's what I'm trying to be. There'll be more and more will come out, but there were cuts to the budget, at least in terms of the amount of supplies available to the fire department, in terms of the resources available, in terms of the equipment. There were cuts. There's no question about that. Something that we can't ignore. And it's also true that the mayor, just when she first returned to the country, was not prepared to talk to the people of her city. I don't think we can dispute that. All right, here's lowest ranking diplomat, the president, talking not about Mayor Bass, but about Governor Newsom. And these words, by the way, this segment, which I just grabbed right from the internet, interesting juxtaposition from Fox, isn't his worst moment. We'll get to what is a far worser moment in a moment.
What's happened is a tragedy, and the governor has not done a good job. With that being said, I got along well with him. When he was governor, we worked together very well, and we would work together. I guess it looks like we're going to be the one having to rebuild it. But what happened there, I don't think there's anything that I've ever seen quite like it.
One can't even.
All right, before I play Newsom's response there, and he's really not responding to what the president-elect said in that segment. It's more what he tweeted, which we'll get to, or put on his Truth Social. The worst, putting all the political effery out, why isn't Trump going there? Newsom said, come see the area, tour the area. I criticize the mayor for not being ready when she returned from her trip to Africa. I'm not going to criticize her right now for being in Africa. Many others have. Go to LA, Trump. That's the minimum. Remember how much rightly criticism W got when he didn't go to New Orleans. It took him forever after Katrina. Well, Trump, you got to go to LA. There's just no doubt about it. All right, here's Newsom. By the way, Trump calls on Newsom to resign. I didn't hear that in that clip. He didn't do it in that clip, but here's the governor.
Onto it. I mean, it's, people are literally fleeing. People have lost their lives. Kids lost their schools. Families completely torn asunder. Churches burned down. This guy wanted to politicize it. I have a lot of thoughts, and I know what I want to say. I won't.
They don't have any water. They didn't have water in the fire hydrants.
Local folks are trying to figure that out. I mean, just when you have a system that's not dissimilar to what we've seen in other extraordinarily large-scale fires, whether it be pipe, electricity, or whether it just be the complete overwhelm of the system. I mean, those hydrants are typical for 2 or 3 fires, maybe 1 fire. You have something at this scale, but again, that's going to be determined by the local.
All right, so you hear the mayor or the governor, rather, he was the mayor, right, of San Francisco, giving the excuse, explanation, what have you. Trump just wanted to cast blame. From Shade Moore, they couldn't use an aerial attack because of the winds. I'm going to look into that a little more closely. I'm not aware that the winds made it impossible, or there was no moments when they couldn't have tried to get at the flames from above. We'll see. Trump's True Social posts really reflecting a lot of ignorance, low rent behavior. I highlighted, he doesn't even call him by his name. I mean, it's so immature. He comes up with this water restoration declaration, which apparently nobody even knew what he was talking about. Talks about the smelt, obviously. I mean, you only have to. I can't take him seriously, but you have to because he's president. Obviously, we should take into account other species. And what Trump was talking about was diverting water that he wanted to do, diverting water not to Los Angeles, not to LA, but to ag land, big ag that supported him, right? Because those big farmers, the planters, the growers are big Trump supporters, give them a lot of money. So what he was calling for wasn't, let's make sure we have enough water in Los Angeles. It was, let's just make sure we can continue this incredibly water-intensive industry, big ag in California, incredibly wasteful industry that's basically in a desert and that is actually making us all less safe. And NBC News made a good point about that, where they just, said, hey, he's apparently talking about some referendum or memorandum that he tried to get Newsom to agree to, which he didn't, which would have diverted a lot of water from Northern California, not to the city, but to farmland. So it wouldn't have had any effect. And yes, endangered species were taken into account, and they should have been, because that's the law. Part of the law is that you have to take into account the various species that human activity is eradicating, eliminating. So, yeah, Trump. But here's the thing. If Democrats don't lead, if Democrats don't demonstrate competence, if they don't demonstrate compassion and empathy in a crisis, then people will vote for Republicans, and understandably so. And so you can see here, Trump is going to give a lot of water, a lot of dam. You'll be able to farm your land. Okay, so it's clearly had nothing to do with protecting people of Los Angeles. And again, the city sprawls. There's it's built in an area where there's already a very high risk of fire. And then we stressed on Friday how the human-caused climate crisis, which sometimes leads to great increases in precipitation and then droughts. So you have more extreme weather, is the worst possible driver when it comes to fires. because increased precipitation, more growth, then dry, arid conditions, the growth becomes brown, dies, or near death, arid, ripe for tremendous amounts of fire. I mean, you don't have a fire in the Sahara because there's nothing to burn. It's just all sand. And yeah, the governor actually handling the president's proposal back in 20 to divert water as a really bad one. So one of the issues that drove the fires that made them as bad as they were is without question inequality. When you have a few people with a tremendous amount of money at the top and everyone else barely making it, just getting by. And California, by the way, is not a particularly wealthy state. There are very, very rich people, but it's not per capita as wealthy as many of the eastern states. But when you have that tremendous amount of inequality, you actually have less tax revenues available to you. And at the same time, you have more people who need support, need help. So that massive shortfall, the lack of resources to fight the fire is in part due to inequality. And California is one of the most unequal states. Tremendous wealth from Silicon Valley, of course, from Hollywood, of course. And then anyone who's been anywhere along the coast, you see the homeless people, you see people who can barely live in their homes. The homes are so expensive. So it's a terribly unequal state. And this crisis is going to very likely make things even worse. Not getting the attention I think it should. People saying, well, it's all the billionaires, it's the people in beautiful Pacific Palisades or parts of Malibu. Pasadena is a wealthy area. No. They'll have insurance. They'll be able to rebuild. But there's working class, middle class areas that are also destroyed. People there are in a lot more trouble. So you can see from AP doing a good job with this story. Although there's a large focus on the $3-4 million homes destroyed, a drive through the charred neighborhoods in Altadena show that they burned through a remarkable haven for generation black families who could live in Altadena when there were various covenants and other legalized segregation, even in California, that prevented them from moving into neighborhoods. So this was a vibrant, working to middle class community, diverse, all fried up. It's all gone. And the homeowners will have insurance, of course, but will they be able to rebuild? Will they have that opportunity? Because there's going to be a tremendous pressure to gentrify, to rebuild in those areas with more expensive homes, bigger homes, luxury homes. That will just intensify the housing crisis. More houses don't necessarily solve a housing crisis if the houses are priced out of the range of the people who need housing. And so again, rebuilding may be out of the reach of many. We're living in a failing state. If it's not a failed state, it's a failing state. What brought to my mind that story was Naomi Klein and disaster capitalism. The way, the worst people who just will take advantage of anything, of anybody, anyone who'll jack up prices whenever they have an opportunity. will use this latest crisis to benefit themselves. Disaster capitalism, as Naomi Klein calls it. Rolling Stone has an article about that in their commentary. They're saying it misses the climate link. What we need to do is protest the fossil fuel industry. I don't know what good, and their political allies. Well, their political allies are everybody. Political allies are both parties. Yes, it is the fossil fuel industry. Protesting the fossil fuel industry isn't going to buy homes for the people who are homeless now. But I'm not saying we shouldn't go after the fossil fuel industry. We should. We should have been doing that for the past 50 years, 60 years, 70 years, jacking up prices on gasoline. But that's not going to end the exploitation that this latest disaster, the exploitation of those who are victims of this latest disaster. Right, again, 240-242-5646. I'm going to look up now. I really am curious about this, whether the helicopters weren't deployed in LA because of the wind. So you can hear me typing because, as you know, Shade keeps me honest here, and maybe that's the reason. I'm somewhat dubious. And here, according to CNN, we used my understanding was they didn't have enough water. Today was a product. We used all our aircraft, our air tankers, our helicopters, according to the CNN fire chief. CNN, when they interviewed the fire chief over there in Pacific Palisades, Cal Fire Battalion Chief Brent Pascua. So I guess they were able to get the copters up in the air. It's unclear whether that was originally they were grounded because they couldn't get off because of the winds. But I'll look into that more as we go forward. I think there were various factors at play. I wanted to highlight this Breaking Points video. I don't a lot of times, sometimes I do talk about my competitors or other YouTubers and the like, but I was watching this video, and so Sagar, who's the resident conservative libertarian on that program along with Crystal Ball, made some statements, and I immediately, my spidey sense was tingling, and I'm like, I don't believe that. I don't think that's true. So I really wanted to play it and then address what he says and where he gets it, in my view, really wrong. But it was even more so than the factual mistake, was just the idea, the theory underlying that mistake was really striking to me. So here we go. Here's Breaking Points.
To have confidence that their government is looking out for them. If you live in Los Angeles, and if you think about these areas, Pacific Palisades, we're talking about an area where I believe the average home price is like several $1 million, yes, which means that the residents there are paying astronomical property taxes. They're probably... All right,
I'm going to stop it right there. So he says they're paying astronomical property taxes. By the way, just to get background, what Sagar said to begin with was a failure of leadership. So he was going back to my point, the city not really giving answers, the mayor silent when she landed at the airport. So that, it's an appearance issue. It's what you want leaders to lead, and that was a failure in that moment. But now he's getting into the issue of the lack of equipment, the lack of water, the fact that the fires tore through this neighborhood, and with these super expensive homes, and these people are paying astronomical property. He said they're paying astronomical property taxes. I want to play that again because That was quite an interesting statement, and I don't believe borne out by the reality. But let's play it again.
And as we're about to get to, but I'll get your reaction first, she did herself no favors in terms of her lack of response to some very basic questions about her own leadership failures.
Yeah, then this is one of those where people look to the person in charge and they need to have confidence that their government is looking out for them. If you live in Los Angeles and if you think about these areas, Pacific Palisades, we're talking about an area where I believe the average home price is like several $1 million, which means that the residents there are paying astronomical property taxes. They're probably taxed, if they're making over $1 million or so, 14% state income tax. It's like, listen, if you're going to pay that much, you pay the sunshine tax, but part of it is sunshine tax. Part of it is, hey, you're probably going to, if there's a horrible fire, someone's going to come out and look out for me. So this is a real abdication.
Right. So this is a really, really pernicious attitude that he just expressed. And I really wanted to make this point. His argument is, because they paid a lot of taxes, they should expect reasonably the government to protect them. No, the government is there to protect all of us. In fact, if you are a multimillionaire, if you make over $1 million a year and you do pay a lot in state income tax, it's true, close to 14% if you're making over $1 million a year in state. This was not the state. This was the criticism is of the county fire department, the area fire. It's not even that. I guess Bass is the mayor of Los Angeles. I guess Los Angeles County. I don't know. Is it mayor of the city? Because Pacific Palisades is not part of Los Angeles City. It's part of Los Angeles County. But so we really want to be fair. Let me just flip that off there. You're not entitled to additional government aid, and you certainly shouldn't expect it because you're rich. In fact, the people who need the support far more are those who don't have vast amounts of wealth, who aren't getting, big shot producers and directors and movie stars. That's where Sagar is completely wrong. I don't know where else to go with that. I mean, it just seems so clear. So I guess LA County, they have a mayor? It's sort of weird. I mean, I guess so. They have a mayor. We have a mayor. She must be the mayor of that whole area, I guess. It's weird the way it all comes down, but because it just sort of occurred to me, well, is she gonna be the mayor of that area, right? Because you would be of the city, but of Los Angeles. But can we blame her for what's happening in Pacific Palisades? It seems like, it's. I guess she's considered, because it says here Newsom and LA Mayor Bass toward Pacific Palisades. So, I think the whole region she's kind of in charge of, as far as I can tell. I don't really understand this stuff. I guess I need to do a better job with it. Sagar completely off base. And he says astronomical property taxes. That's false. In LA County, the unincorporated areas, the effective rate is 0.8%. It's lower than Sacramento and Alameda counties. So where Oakland is, and which aren't that wealthy. So he's just wrong. They're not paying massive property taxes. There's not enough tax revenue in Los Angeles to cover the bills. And I went through this. I was really trying to understand. So understanding property tax in Pacific Palisades, because the state income tax, and let me show, because he said 14%, right? So yeah, but that's the state. That goes to the state. And I'm sure they kick back some of it. If you're making $677,000, you pay 12.3%, and then it's another 1% on top of that if you're over $1 million. in California, period. And I'm sure they kick back some of that. But that's going to the state. That's not going to the LA County, LA Fire Department. Very strange. To argue that because they pay a lot in state income taxes, they should expect their local fire department to give them a special service. It's just not correct. And he gets that very, very wrong. And I wanted to call that out because one of the top premise of this program, the ultimate assumption, if you will, the ultimate goal is the premise, the assumption is the best society is one where everyone has enough and no one has too much. And that's what we're trying to get to. That's why I do this. So for Sagar to argue, well, if you already have so much, you should be getting your services from the government. That's just wrong. All right, 240-242-5646 is the number, and I'm going to be calling it a program. It's been over an hour now. I agree with you, Shay. The people in the encroachment areas are basically trying to get a free ride. They need to spend a lot of money to make construction in encroachment areas. So, well, I think what the issue is, you build houses in these high-risk regions, and you get insurance, and a lot of times you get government assistance, right? The government helps provide some added insurance protection. It backs up the insurance companies, which say, hey, you're building on a beach and the tides, the water keeps getting higher and higher. You shouldn't build here. You're building in an area where there's very high risk of fire. You shouldn't build here. You're going to have to pay exorbitant rates. And you should, right? You should have to. Certainly if you can afford it. So I think that's what Shade's getting at there. I'm going to do some more research on the helicopters and on the way the government works there. But the mayor getting some deserved heat, maybe a little too much, maybe a little bit unfair. I'll be back tomorrow. Do we have a guest tomorrow? We do not have a guest tomorrow, I believe. We'll have Arlen, though. I know, well, that'll be next week. Maybe talk a little bit tomorrow about Maryland, too. That this morning. Have a great afternoon.